Hi, Josh Willis with Resist. Today I wanted to take a few minutes to show you more of a tutorial or guide on how to do a sanded panel using the CNC AutoBlaster. There's two main methods when doing a sanded panel or a frosted panel. And I've noticed that it tends to be more of an East Coast and West Coast, even though it's not only the East Coast or only the West Coast, but from what I've seen in my travels, a lot of people on the East Coast are doing more of a two-step or a double cut process where you're etching the panel and then patching the stencil back in after you frost it. And it tends to be on the West Coast where we do something a little bit different, where we actually engrave it, paint it, then peel out our panel or sanded area, mud it, sand it, and then clean it. So today what I wanted to do is just kind of go over the difference between the two. There's no right and wrong way. Both of them work. Both of them get good results. They're just a little bit different. One way is a little bit easier than the other depending on what you do. So for instance, on something like this where it's one big panel that we're frosting, I would admit that frosting the panel and then patching in the inside would probably be a little bit easier. Where I wouldn't agree with that is on something like this where we're doing artwork or several different sections. To me, it would be too hard to go in and patch all these in when you could just blast it, paint it, mud it, and frost it. So I think, you know, there's two different arguments, but neither one are right or wrong. The third one I'm going to show you today is one that we use on our photoresist film. For me, patching in on something like this would be really difficult because you have 6 areas or 6 panels that are getting frosted. Another great thing about photoresist film is the fact that you can get not just great detail, but a lot of detail. So on this, you can see a lot of characters. It would be a pretty big chore to have to weed all this out if we were doing it with rubber. So I'm going to show you 3 different panels today. You'll see them blasting on the machine, and then because we're doing video, we'll cut it, and you'll be able to see, you know, the start, the middle, and then the finished product. So again, just showing you what we can do on the CNC machine, and look forward to getting any comments or questions on the video. Now we've got our stone masked up, and the first thing we're going to do on this one is we're going to start with a traditional just frosted panel, and then we'll patch in. So what we've done is we've programmed a box, basically that's just to go around the area that's going to get frosted. I'm going to turn the machine speed up to 100, so we're going to go as fast as we can. And I turn the pressure down to 2 bars or 30 pounds of pressure, and I've found that gives us a really nice texture. Today, for this video, we're using a 3660 aluminum zirconia material, or also known as Stone Blast or Miles Blast. So depending on the brand or what type you get, I'm using the Miles Blast. It's a really good abrasive. It's a little pricey, but it lasts a long time, and it's really heavy and durable, and it collects really well. So here we go. I'm going to go and start the machine. You're not going to hear me, but you'll see the machine go ahead and start its path. It's going to do 2 passes back and forth, and then we'll come back and take a look at it. Here we are, we're going to start our second stone. This one we're going to do a little bit differently. We're going to go ahead and blast it. We'll go deep on these letters and then paint them and then frost them. So it'll give us a black outline with a white letter. And then we'll do a sanded panel on both pieces of artwork. I've programmed this in 5 boxes. So we put 1 box, 2, 3, and then 4 and 5 for the artwork. what I'll do is I'll run a contour on this one. On the machine, the laser is going to tell us where the nozzle is actually going to be blasting. So on this stone, if I run that contour, we can follow that laser and see that all of our letters are inside the laser area. This one's a little low just to make sure we get the bottom of the comma. So you can basically see how that works. To see how to program the stone, we have other videos on that. So this one, I'm just going to go straight to it, and we're going to start running the machine and get this stone blasted up for you. Basically, while that stone's blasting, I'm going to patch this one in. Like I've said in other videos, or if I've talked to you on the phone, you've asked me if I was concerned about blow off. No, I'm not, because we're going to make sure that we apply the stencil correctly. It's so important. So there's kind of 3 steps to this. The first step is going to be blowing all the dust off. Just using my hand to loosen any of it. The next step is I want to clean it with some solvent. So I'm going to hit it with a little bit of camping fuel or white gas. Some people call it naphtha. You can really use anything, but I want to use a good solvent. Microfiber or paper towels, either one. Hit it with air one more time. Now, one of the most important steps is actually the heating of it, because the stone is kind of cold, and I'm in San Diego where it never gets cold, but it is important to get all the cold out of the stone. Not just the cold, but the moisture. So as soon as I hit this, you're going to see the moisture come up. That's the moisture I want to remove so it doesn't come up while we're blasting. Remember, as it's blasting, the stone is heating up. So we want to basically just watch that by heating the stone beforehand to make sure we get a good bond, not just while we put the mass down, but while it's blasting. You'll see that moisture start to come out of the stone. Not a lot of time to heat that up. Definitely well worth the time to heat it up, because the time it took me to heat that up saves you a lot of time in having to patch stuff down, put more glue, and make sure you don't have any lift off. This one we're using the rubber with the Mylar. You can go either way, with or without the Mylar. If you do good stone preparation, you won't have to worry. So there we go. Mask is on, ready to go back in to get sandblasting. I'm going to go ahead and roll this down, and then as soon as that stone's done, we'll put it in and we'll get you some video of that one getting blasted as well. All of our stones are blasted, and they're ready to be sanded. The first one we did is right here. So this one just ready for paint, and the underneath side's already sanded. As you can see, all this little detail that we had here, no blow-offs, no lift-ups. Again, that's because we took the mask preparation serious and we applied it correctly, so we didn't have to worry about any blow-offs. We had the bristles running on there, no lifts, so that's good. Here's the other one we did with photoresist film. We're going to get a video of that right now, getting ready to get mudded and then sanded. And then here's the other one we did with rubber, and we're going to go ahead and mud and sand these as well. And we'll show you the sanding process, and then we'll come back and show you the finished stone once it's been cleaned. I'm going to do this with the mud way. So the first thing we're going to do is wet. I like to use glass cleaner because I think it helps the mud stick better. You can use water, but the key is making sure that you wet the stone before you put the mud in, because it helps the mud stick. Now, the other thing that's important is making sure this mud stays wet. How this works is when the sand hits it, it lodges into the mud. If you let this dry, then it turns into clay. Well, clay is softer than rock and it'll blast right out. So what we want to do is make sure it's nice and the stone's nice and wet, and basically we're just going to start rubbing this mud in. If it's a big open area, sometimes we'll use a squeegee, but on these little letters, I'm just going to fill them in by hand. Okay, so we're just going to rub these into the letters, make sure everything's coated, and then I'll show you, we'll come back, once I get all this mudded, I'll come back and show you the key points before we start actually blasting. Remember, the key thing is to make sure that everything is moist so that we don't have our mud blast out. So what I'm going to do, this happens to be one of the hardest stones you can do because of these little lines. Obviously, the bigger the lines, easier it is for the mud to hold and grab. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and wet this before we start, and I'm actually going to wet it in the middle of the process as well, just to ensure that that mud stays nice and wet and sticky. So I'm going to go ahead and spray it down, set my program, and get it started. Just want to make sure everything's going to be in the field of blasting, which it looks pretty good. Perfect. The downside to the mud method is you do have to wash it out, so with water. So what I'm going to do is just with a hose and a nozzle, we're going to wash all that mud out of those letters. It's kind of like painting. You really have to hit all your angles to get the mud out because it gets lodged in there. However, for me, the cleanup is especially on a stone like this, is going to be far faster than patching all those letters in or patching in artwork, especially if you have multiple panels. Like the other stone, if it's one solid panel, it's really not that much work to patch in. And for the final stone, we're just going to do the mud on the photoresist film. Now, because the photoresist film is a lot thinner, it's a lot easier to mud than with rubber. So you'll notice that this one is going a little faster. Plus, we don't have as complicated of a design, being that it's smaller and thinner areas. So this one's going to mud pretty quick. We can basically just using our hands to get it full, squeegee to make sure we pull off any excess. What we're going to do is just hose this one out. This is the one that we did with photoresist film. And then when we're done, we'll look at all three stones and see our results. Probably the biggest advantage of the cut-in method is the cleanup. So once we peel this, it's done. We do not have to hose out any mud. You could do this with the rubber that has Mylar as well as the one without Mylar. What's the advantage? The advantage of using the Mylar is that it has a little bit more aggressive tack. However, you can make it work without the Mylar, and the advantage of that is that this took us 5 passes to blast, and we could have got away with less because it takes at least 1 to 1.5 passes just to blast through the Mylar. So that's something that you have to play with and see what, is it better for you to use it with or without? It's a personal preference. So here's this one, and I'll finish cleaning this one up, and then we'll cut back to show you all three. Okay, guys, here it is. We're done. We got the 3 stones done. Remember, we used 2 different methods and 2 different materials. The first one we did is using the photoresist film and using the mud method. Again, I would not want to patch in 6 different panels here, so we blasted the whole thing and then painted it, peeled the panels, mud it, frost it, wash it out. Another advantage of the photoresist film, remember, is the fact that we can get a lot of detail on here. This stone takes 3 to 5 minutes. The stencil for this stone takes about 3 to 5 minutes to make. Whether you're doing 1 word or 1,000, it's all the same. We tend to be a little more partial on photoresist film. That's what we use, but you don't have to. The other 2 stones we did here were both done with rubber, 2 different methods. The first one being your patch in or your double cut, where we cut out the main panel, frosted it, then placed it back in using proper mask application or stencil application, and then went and reblasted it, paint it. The advantage on this one is when we go to clean up, we just peel the mask and clean up and it's done. The disadvantage is you have to patch in, which you're applying the mask twice. On our last stone, done with rubber again as well, we did the mud method. So we blasted the whole panel and then peeled out our sections, mudded them, and then washed them. A disadvantage, you do have to wash it out with water. The advantage is we do not have to plug in the artwork. In this case, we'd probably just frost these letters. We wouldn't plug them in. That would be far too much work. But nevertheless, that's the 3 different stones that we did for you today on the CNC AutoBlaster. Really want to thank you guys for watching. Be sure to leave comments below. If you have any questions or comments, you can always leave them below or reach out to us. You can reach us at www.raisethis.com or 1-800-RAISE-THIS, which is 1-800-729-9478. We always love to hear from you. Again, thanks for watching. If you have any other questions or comments, please reach out. Thanks again.